My piece of Honda moaned in the darkness as I parked it next to the only other vehicle there, a battered Corolla with faded red paint that matched the restaurant's exterior, while the neon sign flickered as I pulled into the empty parking lot of Marrow's drive-in. The W sputtered every week, making the name read Marrow's. I couldn't afford to be picky at this point because I needed this job because my mom's medical costs weren't going to be paid by herself, and dropping out of college meant that my student loans were due. The night shift paid double what other jobs offered. Before I could knock, the front door creaked open, revealing a girl my age standing there with heavy circles under her eyes that made her appear older than she actually was. Her name tag Sarah's handwriting is jagged. "You must be coming quick. We don't keep the door unlocked after dark," Jamie said, looking over her shoulder at something I couldn't see. Her hands were shaking as she held the door, and the fluorescent lights inside buzzed aggressively, casting harsh shadows across the empty kitchen. From the outside, the place appeared larger than it had any right to be, but the walls inside seemed to stretch. Into darkness training is rather simple. Sarah led me to the drive-thru window and said, "The night shift is drive-thru only, no dine-in service after sunset." Her hands were shaking so much that she had to enter the test order 3 times. When she reached for a cup, I noticed track marks on her arms, but they looked too regular, like something had been inserted rather than injected. "Just caffeine," she muttered, but her coffee cup sat untouched and cold. "The register is old but dependable. Been here since the establishment opened in 1976. And all of the original equipment is still here." The old kitchen machinery hummed behind us, and a meat grinder turned on by itself. Sarah quickly turned it off without saying anything to the first customer, but she straightened up abruptly. I hadn't heard a car approach, but the drive-thru window was now illuminated by headlights. Before I heard a voice that sounded moist in some way, like someone speaking through a mouthful of liquid, Sarah's face turned pale and the speaker crackled to life with static. "Welcome to Marrow. I would like to take your order number 7 rare," Sarah stated into the microphone in a professional yet nervous manner. Extra sauce gushed out of the voice. There was no number 7 on the menu board when I looked at it. When Sarah handed the bag out the window, she was already bagging something from the warming tray order up when she shouted out, her voice shaking. The security video screen displayed an empty car when I first saw the customer. I blinked and peered out the window. When the elderly guy accepted the bag, his fingers were too long and bent in unfeasible ways, and he smiled, flashing teeth that appeared filed to a regular client. His complexion was gray in the fluorescent light. Sarah spoke hastily while obsessively cleaning her hands on her apron. "Tony has been coming here for a while," but she didn't respond and continued to wipe her hands even though they were clean. When the small mirror reappeared, she tilted her face to ensure that her reflection was still properly shaped. As the night passed, each customer felt uncomfortable. What I saw through the window never matched what I saw on the security cameras. As the hours went by, Sarah became increasingly jittery and kept checking her reflection. At around 2 in the morning, I noticed her pushing her fingers against her teeth to make sure they weren't loose. The scraping began when the food chip connected to the kitchen, generating a metal sound like nails on steel. Minutes later, the security camera showed movement in the kitchen, but the feed was grainy and distorted. A shadow passed through frame dragging something, and I heard a muffled scream cut short Sarah. I called out, but no one answered, and the drive-thru speaker crackled again. Sarah slammed it shut so hard that the entire wall shook and the bathroom broke. She said abruptly, "Tight, watch the window, don't open the chute if you hear anything they're trying to get back in." There wasn't a car in sight, but a voice exclaimed, "Welcome to Marrow," in Sarah's clear voice. My mouth felt dry. Sarah was still in the kitchen, but her movements were incorrect, according to the surveillance footage. She was moving toward the rear freezer, jerky like a puppet on strings. Leaving it dark while searching for the employee Marrow, I discovered her in the break room on the tiles. It was in an employee locker, with a discolored cover and ragged bite marks on the corners that were too large for human teeth. When I lifted it up, something moist fell from the pages, and the speaker crackled once more. Sarah's voice was different now, hungry number 7, and it gurgled extra rare. The meat grinder began to grind again, but with no teeth, spinning in the dark. Somewhere in the building, I heard dragging footsteps getting closer to the drive-thru window, so I trembled and opened the manual. Hands frantically looking for solutions. Rules were scrawled on the pages in a variety of handwriting styles, some of which were so wobbly as to be nearly unreadable. The paper felt warm, like it had just been wet, and some of the text was obscured by dark stains. As the footsteps approached, the security camera captured Sarah walking toward the counter, but her movements were incorrect. The feed was distorted, and for a brief moment, I could see what was wearing Sarah's uniform using her voice. The small mirror on the kitchen floor was broken, reflecting something that couldn't be there, and the meat grinders became louder and more insistent. When the object that had been Sarah reached the drive-thru window, I understood why the building felt larger inside than the outside. It needed room to process the employee manuals. The regulations became more apparent as I flipped the pages, and somewhere over the scraping metal and mechanical hum, I heard Linda Hayes, the manager nobody sees in the daytime, laughing aloud with too many voices at once. As I read the warm, slightly throbbing paper through the drive-thru window on my first night at Marrow's drive-in, the pages of the manual adhered to my fingers. With each step making a wet clicking sound across the tarmac, I saw the thing bearing Sarah's face shamble toward her abandoned car as if her joints had been realigned. Rule 1 jumped out right away, the letters darker than the others, and I forced myself to concentrate on the rules while trying to block out the sounds of the meat grinder spinning faster behind me. Every car without headlights has a former employee serving them in 30 seconds or less. A car pulled into the drive-thru lane without headlights. Sarah was seated in the driver's seat on the surveillance monitor, but her face was shifting between shots. When I read the next rule, my stomach churned. Scraping from the food chute, keeping it closed, and trying to get back in. Now, something wet dripped from the chute seam, darker than grease or oil, and moved across the metal surface as if it was looking for a way through Rule 3. The handwriting was shaky, but I knew it was Sarah's, and when an order was repeated 3 times, they managed to get inside and lock themselves in the freezer. The number 7 was crackled by the speaker. For the second time today, my hands began to shake as Sarah's distorted voice yelled out extra rare. I continued reading the pages while my perspiration stuck to them. The next guideline was partially hidden by black stains, but if you find teeth in a food waste grinder, switch it on right away. Palm's clients who buy fresh meat must be handed the special menu from under the register. A kind elderly woman pulled up to the window as the machinery buzzed loudly, almost expectantly. Sarah's notes in the margin stated that Mrs. Peterson had been visiting this place for years, but the security feed revealed something very different. A mass of twisted flesh and an excessive number of smiling mouths. The security cameras reveal the true appearance of the consumers. The next guideline is to keep them from knowing that you can see their genuine form. The last rule was written in fresh ink that hadn't dried. Children in cars after 2 a.m. aren't children anymore. Don't give them what they ask for. I kept my eyes down as I handed Mrs. P her order. Her fingers brushed mine cold, slicked too many joints, but her jaw unhinged like a snake's as she took her first bite in the parking lot. The time read 1:57 a.m. I discovered when I hit play on the most recent clip, Sarah's distorted face filled the screen, her features subtly shifting as she spoke on day 67 at Marrow, whispering her voice wet. I could feel it changing me. Sarah's phone on the floor cracked, but the screen was still recording. The video gallery was full of dozens of clips, all of which showed Sarah's face becoming less human in each thumbnail. The video ended as Sarah's face split open and more cars pulled in. Linda said, I'm getting promoted soon, just like Tony, just like all the others." Her teeth were too sharp and too many, and she smiled. The food wasn't going to the customers. Instead, we were feeding something else that had been here since Bill Marrow opened this place, and it was really hungry. The security stream displayed the genuine shapes of the late-night rush of clients. Former workers' twisted bodies of metal and flesh blended with the restaurant's equipment. I was able to identify identities and facial expressions from the staff images in the break room. The speaker crackled once more while frozen in different phases of metamorphosis. When I heard Sarah's voice for the third time, "Number 7, exceptionally uncommon, they managed to get in." I rushed to the freezer, but Linda Hayes was standing in the hallway, her outline swaying as if she were being seen through water, and several voices talked at once. Jamie's face was sad. Rippling, "I see that you found the employee handbook to be effective. You will need to be aware of the rules, but you won't be behind Sarah." I witnessed the reality of Marrow's enormous interior. The walls breathed, the machinery wasn't just operating without power, but it was growing like metal tumors, and the pipes pulsed with something thicker than grease. The 1976 equipment hadn't been maintained, it had evolved, and the night shift pays double for a reason. We're always searching for committed workers who understand that everything has a cost, and Linda's speech persisted as her skin changed, showing glimmers of Bill Marrow's original smiling logo underneath. The buzz of a grinder got unbearable through the kitchen window. When I saw Mrs. Peterson's car circle around for another pass, her jaw was still out of joint, but now there were several tongues stuck in her throat. The security camera revealed her actual shape more clearly, with layers of processed meat and twisted bone covering her like an ill-fitting costume made of a grandmother's skin. Sarah now works in customer service. Before I could respond, the drive-through speaker turned on, but instead of Sarah's voice, I heard the sound of processing the wet mechanical component. Linda added, "Would you like to see what that means?" as her face split into a familiar smiling logo. The restaurant's noise started to make the manual's regulations seem absurd because we weren't serving food to the patrons. Instead, we were getting the staff ready for consumption. "It's time for your real training to start." Linda's too wide smile stretched unnaturally farther. I noticed that my face was subtly distorted when I looked at my reflection in the break room window. I pressed my fingers against my teeth, which felt loose, and the scraping in the food chute became louder and more desperate. Someone was trying to get back in, but something was already shifting beneath my skin. As I stared at my warped reflection, I finally realized that my grandfather was referring to the hungry places in the old country. My phone rang at 6 p.m. The following day, I attempted to call in sick in order to avoid working another night shift because my skin had been crawling since I left this morning and my teeth were hurting in their sockets. However, as I was about to leave town completely, I drove past mile marker 146, and my hands began to bleed, but at marker 147, my hands began to sizzle where my fingers melted against the steering wheel, and by 148, I felt my organs begin to liquefy. I turned around, and the pain stopped the moment I pulled into Marrow's parking lot. The sign pulsed in time with my heartbeat, and the missing W was now dripping something dark onto the pavement beneath the regular customer. Tom Wilkins sat around in the drive-thru lane where I had given him hamburgers and fries the night before. Nothing weird, but the security feed had shown something else wearing Tom's face, and now I could see it without the cameras. His skin rippled as he waited, features rearranging like wet clay. I walked inside on trembling legs. The break room photos caught my eye, years of staff pictures lining the walls. I was too preoccupied with Sarah's disappearance to notice the details last night, but now I could see the development. Every month, the employees' eyes and jaws revealed slight alterations, stretching skin texture and becoming waxy translucent. By the time they were photographed, they hardly resembled human. The drive-thru speaker yelled "Welcome to Marrow" as Sarah's final photo displayed her faces in plural mid-merger. Tom's voice gurgled, but he was still sitting silently in his car, mouth now split into multiple feeding apertures. The order repeated from the speaker, this time in Sarah's voice. Then Linda's many voices joined in a chorus of hunger. Third time they'd found another way, and I ran for the freezer. But my childhood limp betrayed me. The old injury from the car crash suddenly felt deliberate, like something had been making sure I couldn't run. When the time came, the hallway stretched impossibly long, the freezer door retreating faster than I could hobble, rippling. Linda Hayes emerged from a wall. The building moaned around us, the corridors twisting like intestines, and the original technology pulsed quicker, processing something that screamed with Sarah's voice. Your shifts were just beginning, and dozens of incorporated personnel were heading somewhere. Linda was correct when she asked, you feel it, don't you? The hunger and need to feed. Her various words were echoing in my head. Your grandfather understood Linda's point that he had met Ed, one of our franchises in the old country, which is why he had warned your father about this place. But hunger always prevails, and the need to feed always brings them back. My face was slightly warped in the hallway window, resembling the early staff photos. The barriers wavered, exposing I recognized faces from the break room images, and I could still see the mouths moving and receiving orders after decades of processing personnel stuck in the membrane. When I wandered into the main kitchen, I noticed that everything had altered. The meat grinder now looked like a twisted throat processing machine, and the equipment had grown to blend in with the walls and ceiling. Equipment set up like digestive organs. Tom Wilkins entered through the wall, his human disguise no longer irritating him. He gurgled through several lips, Linda, the new employee is not adhering to the correct protocol. She made too many faces when she grinned. Jamie needs to see what happens when we break the rules, just as you and Sarah did. Tom's body dissolved into its actual form. A jumble of industrial parts and processed meat that nonetheless had remnants of his human appearance. The reality of his change was captured by the surveillance cameras. The employment handbook arrived in Linda's overflowing hands, and my teeth suddenly dropped out and were replaced by something sharper and hungrier. She said, let's see how well you've learned the rules. Pages are now written in fresh blood, and it's time for your performance review. I could feel the changes quickening as my limbs started to realign and my bones moved to match the machinery surrounding us. The organs in the restaurant pulsed in time with my new anatomy. My flesh blending with the living walls of Marrow. Sarah had completed her metamorphosis into the ideal fusion of employee and equipment, and her many faces grinned with industrial efficiency as her abandoned automobile rolled up to the drive-through window with its headlights dim inside. One last crackle came from the speaker. Hi, may I take your order? Welcome to Marrow. As I was getting ready to respond in the break room, I noticed that my voice was changing as the staff photos kept evolving. My initial photo had already surfaced, showcasing the minor adjustments that signaled the start of the sound of Linda's voices filled the living restaurant. Time spent serving the clients under the fluorescent lights. Jamie's time to feed my new teeth shone brightly. The original 1976 equipment was still making food for the actual clients someplace deep within the facility, since the hunger was now unbearable. When the next car pulled up to the window, its headlights blazing, the security monitor flickered as former employees pulled into the drive-through lane. The headlights were dark cars moving with mechanical precision, and each vehicle contained a perfect fusion of worker and restaurant industrial efficiency wrapped in processed flesh. Linda's voices echoed from every wall, and now you see the truth. Jamie Marrow doesn't serve food, it serves a purpose. This is the first time I've ever understood the employee discount. The alterations had sped after breaking the rules, with each infraction bringing me closer to my final form. As she spoke, my new anatomy moved beneath my uniform, with bones clicking into industrial arrangements and muscles changing to connect with the living machinery. The founder wasn't Bill Marrow. Linda kept making faces. Every franchise requires a proper start, and he was the first component that evolved into this institution, surrounded by generations of processing workers. The actual size of Marrow's interior was revealed as the walls peeled apart. There were innumerable former workers hanging in the membrane, each in a different processing step, and their mouths moved in unison as they took orders, satisfying the need that had existed since the first restaurant opened. When Sarah came out of the kitchen, her transformation was complete, and the tiny mirror she had been checking constantly now reflected her actual shape embedded in her body. Through several mouths, she stated, "The process is beautiful. The combination of efficiency and appetite has made us more than just employees, we are now vital parts." Realizing that its own metal and meat had developed together since 1976 to create anything, the initial apparatus pulsed more quickly. Beyond both, the restaurant wasn't just alive, it was a completely different kind of existence. I observed the security feeds as my body changed, and the cameras captured our true selves. Natural, even my limp had been intentional, ensuring that I couldn't flee when the last change started, and your grandfather nearly joined us. The machinery was made for perpetual consumption. Linda's voices came out carrying after processing memories for decades. He came across our European branch and realized the hunger, but he left before his conversion was complete. However, the drive-through speaker crackled with the voices of past employees, all of whom were giving orders. Every request contained shards of their past human memories that were being converted into pure hunger. My pal from childhood, when Mike arrived at the window, the surveillance feed revealed his actual shape. He vanished 3 months ago after working the night shift at another restaurant, and I now realize that all fast food establishments are linked to various organs in the same hungry system. "The decision is yours," Linda added. The restaurant's digestive system had been perfecting this process since the beginning, and my reflection revealed the final changes. Rippling with possibilities, the meat grinder roared to life, processing the last remnants of my previous existence. Each piece of equipment had a purpose, transforming employees into something greater. Taking hold of biological hunger combined with industrial efficiency to create something that may effectively fulfill Marrow's actual purpose. The regulations were in place to guarantee correct handling of each infraction, bringing us one step closer to our final form. We weren't serving food, rather, we were serving evolution itself, transforming humanity into something new with every order processed. I could feel the hunger then, not just mine, but the appetite of every processed employee as a whole. The voices of Linda said, "I'm ready to begin your management training at Unicon." My new anatomy was in accordance with the restaurant systems, and although the hunger was intense, it now had direction and the rules made perfect sense as recommendations for positive change. When a new employee arrived the following day, I noticed that their reflection had already undergone minor adjustments. My teeth shone under the fluorescent lights as I stated, "Training begins." The employee handbook surged in my numerous hands, with rules written in a fresh knowledge, "Welcome to Marrow." The surveillance cameras captured my actual form as I started outlining the regulations. Every shift brought new workers, new ingredients, and fresh evolution. Industrial perfection combined with biological purpose. When I checked the security feeds one last time, my reflection revealed what I had become: a perfect version of myself. The sign outside flickered, the missing W dripping fresh possibility inside the original equipment continued to process humanity into something greater, with each franchise spreading across highways and back roads and turning workers into components of a vast hungry system. Combination of employee and eatery hunger was now a source of fulfillment rather than a curse. Another vehicle arrived. The speaker crackled as I leaned near the microphone, my voice blending with the machinery. "Welcome to Marrow's Drive-In. May I take your order?" The hungry smiled with industrial precision, the headlights blazing, another prospective employee seeking the double salary for the night shift. After all, we're always taking applicants for the night shift, feeding, serving, and processing. Would you want to try our number 7? It's fresh, never frozen, and extremely rare. Processing would start shortly.